Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dinner with the Doctor. We're so excited that you're here. You can feel free to take a seat on the tables that have tablecloths. There's some information for you on those tables. And before we begin, we're going to start with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come before your throne of grace and mercy at this moment in time, and we just want to thank you, Lord, for the goodness that you show towards sinners like us. And at this moment, as we go through this program of Dinner with the Doctor, and we learn about exercise, as Dr. Hess is going to present, and as we do a food demo, I pray that it may be a blessing to those who will be watching with us, those in person and those online as well. Please be with us forevermore. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. My name is Nazrana Khan, for those who are not familiar with who I am, and I'm going to be introducing my colleagues with you who've helped me prepare this food. And I'm going to start off with demonstrating one of the most favorite foods that I've had my entire life, which is biryani. So I have a part Indian background, even though I grew up in Zimbabwe, and I love food, and it'll be coming out to you shortly. And I'll just give a preference before I even start, because I know you're going to start eating before I get to show it. If you see this is a bay leaf. Whatever you do not chew it, because it is very flavorful, and you may just be full of that flavor in your mouth. And then we have this as well, and this is coriander seeds. So don't chew it as well. It tastes really good if you're used to it, and if you're not accustomed to it, you may just have a burst of flavor in your mouth. So we'll be using that. And the last one that I'll give you a caution on is what we call cardamom seeds. So I use this biryani spice or herb that I actually buy from the Indian store in Stevensville. And you're going to see it looks like a little green seed. You may see it. Not everyone will have it in their plate. So be careful, don't chew that one as well. So those are the three ones. If you find anything else, well, it's a surprise and I am so sorry. Those that are online, you're saved by not having to go through that process. So I'll just start off by demonstrating the different herbs that we use, and we'll get into it. And at any point, if you have questions as you're eating, feel free to let me know. So it's a three-step process for making the biryani, and I made it the way that my aunt taught me. And before I left Zimbabwe, she made a whole big pot for me, so I had a whole week of just eating it every day, and I was so excited. And it's a little spicy, so if you have a high spice tolerance, forgive me. I mean, a low spice tolerance, forgive me. So the first step that you start with is by having your rice. So we use this basmati brown rice, and you can get it from Aldi's, and I know you can get it as well from Myers as well. So we use this basmati brown rice. So you soak it for 20 minutes. So I soaked this, and when you soak it, you realize it actually puffs up, and it makes it way easier when it comes to cooking it. And once it's done and cooked, it will look like this. I'm not sure if our cameras can see it as well, and everyone if you can see it. So this is how it will look like when it is cooked. And it actually looks really good and tastes really good, and it's a long grain as well. So if you're familiar with just eating white rice, and when you eat this one, it's kind of hard to tell the difference sometimes, especially when you've infused it with the vegetables that you're eating. So that's the aspect of the rice. So we've already cooked the rice, and we leave it here, and then when I come to the step for what you need to do with the rice, I'll show you. So now I'm going to go to step number 2. So if you've noticed, there's cashews in it. So just give a preference for those who may be allergic to nuts. There's cashew nuts in it. That's the only item that could cause something that we don't want it to cause. So Cashews are optional to use for topping, and onions as well. It's just to make it look pretty when you're done. So once you're done layering it, you put the toppings on top. And this is how it looks like. It's basically just slightly sauteing the cashews and the onion together. So that's what it is. So I'm going to go ahead now and make the main part of it, which is the vegetable part. So I'm going to make it in my pot, and at any point, if we have somebody who wants to volunteer and help with stirring the pot, even though I know you're trying to eat your food, feel free to come. So we're just going to add a bit of the olive oil in the pot. And then I always prefer starting with putting my onions in, as well as putting my garlic as well. So, and normally I'm like one of those people, I've watched some reels where when you're cooking, whenever you touch something, you go to the sink and you're washing your hands and you're coming back. That's me. So I'm pretending like I'm washing my hands and coming back. So then you just start with the turmeric, and you just add your turmeric inside. And one thing I love about cooking this, it is the aroma it brings. And for me, it just reminds me of childhood, because it's just so beautiful. Then you add your bay leaves. And all the other spices that you have that are listed on the ingredients. And one thing too is, if you don't have the biryani spice, you can always use the one that's called garam masala. That one works as well. So you use that. How's the food tasting so far? I'm hearing silence. I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, I'm getting thumbs up. So praise the Lord. Okay, and we just keep adding them. So because I have been cooking here quite some time, I've learned the importance of measuring, because I hardly measure, but I realized it's good to measure. People are like, what did you put? And I'm like, I don't know the measurements. So I'm learning to measure, so I just use a teaspoon sometimes. So it's important to just keep stirring as you go. And the point where I add the other vegetables, like the tomatoes, is when I smell that the turmeric has actually cooked. Because you can taste when the turmeric is raw. I was trained to taste when the turmeric is raw and when it is cooked. So that gives it the difference when you leave it to cook for some time. So as I'm cooking, turning it right now, I'm smelling like, it's not yet there yet. And for fun, I added mint. I went a little unconventional, because I love doing things like that sometimes. And then I added some mint in it just to give it a different flavor and texture when you taste it. And one thing with the coriander seeds, they will let you know when they're ready, is because they start popping. And if you don't like to take your coriander seeds out, you can grind them if you have like the grinder. So for me right now, it smells pretty good up here. I had a friend who used to tell me, when people cook, you can smell they clothe smell of the food. And I'm like, well, it's all those spices. When you cook it every day, you kind of end up start smelling of it. But then you get used to it, and when you don't smell it, you're like, am I at the right house? So now I can smell that, okay, we're getting to a point where it's cooked, and you can actually even see the color. It changes color and becomes a little bit like golden. That's when you see, and then I get ready to add the tomatoes. So because I love having my vegetables not overly cooked, and by vegetables I mean like broccoli, cauliflower, and my green beans, I like having them when they just still a little crunchy, I put them in last. And because you're gonna leave it to like simmer a bit, so it depends on how overcooked you like your vegetables to be. Does anyone have any questions whilst we do this? No, people are just chewing away. Well, that's the good thing with having whole grain food. You are kind of forced to exercise your mouth, right, and your jaw. Ginger garlic paste. So there's a store down the street. Oh, you would like to ask it again for those that are online so they can hear your question.
Where do you find that in the store?
Okay. The ginger garlic paste from Hardin's store right down the street. You can get it from Walmart. You can get it from Myers, even though I pronounce it major. But you can get it from Myers. You can get it there. So they have it like in a tube paste. Or the best is just to make it from scratch. You get the whole ginger and the whole garlic and just finely chop it, all of them, and then you can put them in there. I find that's the most economical way to do it. And it's always good if you can use it without it being over-processed and packaged. That's the best option. Okay, so now, before I add the vegetables, because my tomatoes are already beginning to cook and simmer, and they're disintegrating and not looking like tomatoes, I'm now at the point where I will add the coconut milk. So if this was not a plant-based recipe, then there would be yogurt or a substitute that's called sometimes you'd add ghee into it, or something called lacto, where I grew up in Zimbabwe, it's called lacto. But we're going to add coconut milk, and it has the same texture to just basically do the same thing and gives it that nice flavor as well. So I add that inside, and then you kind of just hear the simmering go away slightly. I love cooking because for me, it's quite therapeutic and healing. So whenever I'm in the kitchen cooking a lot, it's normally because I'm thinking a lot and trying not to think, and I'm just there with the pots and the vegetables and getting to experiment and learn, oh, this flavor, I like it, and I want to change this recipe. So I'm thankful for people who start recipes because then I get to work on them more. Okay, so this is really looking good. And so now I'm going to add the vegetables that we have. So we have green beans, cauliflower, broccoli, and mushrooms. So with the mushrooms as well, you can choose to add the mushrooms when you onions. You could choose to do that, or you could choose to add them at the same time. Depends on how cooked you like your mushrooms. So how many of you have had biryani before today? Oh, wow, okay. So I'm going to get expert results and reviews because they've tried it before. Please feel free to leave comments on our YouTube channel, Facebook page, and Instagram, so those who watch can see that they too can come here and try the food as well and get to enjoy the lectures that come after it. It's a wonderful place to come with your family, wonderful place to come even for those in relationships. This can be a date, a unique way to interact together. So you Okay, so whilst that is cooking, I'm going to show you how it actually looks like. So this is the one that you have actually been eating. So it looks like this. I'm not going to tilt it too much in case it just falls and we have a whole mess, but this is how it looks like. So when you're done, it will look like this. And if you're like me, when I grew up cooking with my dad, we hardly ate with everyone else on the table because we were done eating in the kitchen, sampling the whole time. So this could be a good way to sample and just basically have it as a soup. If you want to take it out and be like, oh, I'll have this with another meal or do something else with it, you can do that as well. Okay, so now we've come to the point where I'm going to show you how to layer it. So I try to get a clear glass bowl so you can see it. So you can have the option of putting different layers, which is the gravy that you made. So it'll be the rice, the gravy, the rice, the gravy. Or you could just have the option of putting the rice in and just mixing it together, and that's how you can have it. But I like the layered flavor because you have different flavors as you go, and when you leave it to simmer, it flavors differently. So you could do that as well. So I'm going to come and leave that cooking, and I'll layer. Is there anybody who would like to help me with layering it? Emmy, may I please ask you to come and help me? Emmy is my amazing colleague, and she's one of the interns here at Village, and she's actually going to be demonstrating the salad. Emmy has been teaching me to enjoy salad because she loves it. You can take your gloves. So we're going to start off. Are you able to see this from where you're sitting? Our online audience, are you able to see it as well? Okay, so we're going to start with just layering some rice at the base. One thing I like about Emmy, she's tall, so she can stretch way more. I'm like on my tippy toes, and she's just like amazing. Great. So you can choose to lay it how you prefer. Can be way more rice, less gravy, whatever your preference is. And then afterwards, we will put the gravy. So it will kind of look like a vegetable trifle. So instead of chocolate, cake, ice cream, it's rice, the gravy, and rice. So this is you layering it however you want. So I'm going to ask a quiz question. Which herbs did I ask you to take out of your plate and not to eat? Okay, and what's the last one? Cardamom, exactly. That's true. I've had incidences where I'm like, because I grew up eating with my hands, I'm like chewing, enjoying, and then you just crunch into it like, oh, your face sells you out, and everyone's like, oh, you got it. Yes, there's more rice in that other one. We end with rice. Okay. She just asked a very good question. Do we end with the vegetables or do we end with the rice? So we end with the rice because we're going to put the toppings on top and then it looks pretty. And I have learned that I eat with my eyes first. So, and I know there's research about it. So if it doesn't look appetizing to my eyes, there's a high probability I'm not going to eat it. So, and my siblings have learned that too. So my mom, God bless her, she went all out of her way to make it look appetizing for all of us. Perfect. Okay, and then, so now for the toppings, we're gonna use that one, and you can just sprinkle it however you would like. And then I just kept some fresh cilantro, so we can put it on top, because it's nice and green, and the toppings are yellow, so it gives that nice contrast to the eyes, and great to the taste buds. Okay, and I appreciate you, Emmy, for helping. I know you're about to start your demonstration for how you made the salad. So this is how it will look like this, and then like that. So when you're dishing, it may not, when you now get it into your plate, it may not look as pretty as it looks when it's like this, but that's how it looks like. So that's the biryani, and what I normally do is I just cover it with tin foil, because it will be in a pot, and then leave it to simmer for like 5 minutes, and then switch off the heat, and just leave it for another 5 minutes, and then afterwards I serve it with something else. And so today what we did was we decided to serve it with some salad on the side and some roasted potatoes. So at this point, I'm going to ask Emmy to come up as she lets us know why she chose that salad and how she made it and how it was tasting good. I know I cannot wait to eat it. She's been encouraging me to eat salad, and it's been a good journey. Testing. Yes.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. So the salad that's on your plates, it's a pretty simple salad. It's spring greens, spinach, mini peppers, mini sweet peppers, grape tomatoes, and cucumber. And the dressing is homemade as well. So the salad, it's like a nice variety of colors, and it has the vegetables are all fresh. So that's one of my favorite things about eating a salad, having that nice bite of all the vegetables. And the dressing is pretty simple. It's just lemon juice, olive oil, and seasonings of your choice. So I use garden mix seasoning. I use plenty of garlic and parsley. So when you can put 1 part lemon juice, 1 part olive oil, and put in your seasonings, putting some salt, and that'll just mix it up until it's emulsified, and that's your dressing.
Thank you. So I have a question. Why have you been encouraging me to eat my salad?
Well, salad is really important to any meal that you eat. It's best to always start with your raw food first.
Oh, it's saying your mic is gone off.
Hello? There
Yeah.
we go. It's always best to eat your raw food first so that your stomach can be able to digest that first, since it's what's easier to digest. And I just really enjoy salad, so I always try to encourage my friends to eat more salad.
Thank you. Seems like we were having some mic situations, but oh, she is going to repeat it.
Okay. So it's always best to start with your salad, since that's what's easier for your stomach to digest first. And I personally enjoy eating salad anyway, so I like to encourage my friends to eat more salad.
Yes, and I can vouch to that. If anyone needs some encouragement, contact Amy, and you will enjoy salad. Thank you so much, Amy. At this moment in time, I am going to call up Hannah, and Hannah is my colleague as well and a health ministry intern here, and she made the amazing potatoes that you just ate. And when she was making them, I was like, ooh, they smelling good. So, Hannah, tell us, how did you make your potatoes?
Sure. So you take your potato, whether it's a russet or Yuka potato, recommend those ones. Just peel them off, wash them thoroughly, and just chop them into cubes. I can just demonstrate that right here. And if you want to, after you chop it, you can like soak it for some time just to remove extra starch so that when you bake it, it's nice and soft. So take your potato, put on my gloves here. And this is a very simple recipe, so it's excellent for breakfast, dinner, however you want to use it. It's a nice side. So yeah, so take your potato. I like to just cut it in the middle. Just cut in the middle. There's just a little bud part. Let's take that off. All right, so just cut it again, once again in the middle, and just chop it off into small cubes. Do the same with the other one. All right, so once you have your potatoes chopped, what you can do is just stick them in a pot, add some salt, and just boil them until they're like slightly tender. This just helps it to be, when you bake it, that the outside is crispy, but the inside is nice and soft. And so that's what it's gonna help out with. So yeah, take them, and before you do that, actually, we wanna season them.
Right.
So on your recipe books, you will see the different seasonings we used, like cumin, cayenne pepper, smoked paprika. We used some garlic powder and creole seasoning. So I have this mix.
Creole seasoning
Because, well, my fiance is from Haiti, so I have immersed myself into the Haitian cuisine. So
it's beautiful to watch.
So, yes. So we just take the potatoes and put on, after you boil them. It's an extra step, so if you don't want to do it, that's totally fine, but just go ahead and mix it with the seasoning. You can also add some little bit of oil, also just to help your pan not to stick. And yeah, just toss it around, and it will be nice and colorful, right? And then just stick it on the pan, and I like to put the turmeric twig just right there, so it just infuses and it gives it a nice herby flavor. If you also want, you can just, take off some of them and just put them inside as well.
Yeah, rosemary and potatoes go so well together.
Yes, so just put it on the side there. Bake it on 425 for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then you got your nice crispy roasted potatoes.
Right. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Absolutely.
I really enjoy whenever she makes potatoes and cooks. Her food is great. And if you missed her previous demonstration, she did about 2 weeks, last month,
Yes,
right?
that was last
She
month.
cooked last month, so I would advise you to go and check it on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So this brings us to the end of our food demo. Before I go off the stage and Dr. Hess comes up, does anyone have any questions? I love it. Clear as mud? Okay, mud is clear. That's good to know. Okay, at this moment in time, I'm going to have Dr. Hess come up. Thank you so much.
Okay. Whoa. Can you hear me? Sounds like I'm a little loud here. Is that it? Can the people in the back hear me okay? And the people in front are not being blasted out too bad? We'll see. All right, we're good? Did everyone get the handout? You should have 3 handouts now. You should have those recipes. And those oh, that food, was that good? I feel like, man, if we could do this like 2 or 3 times a week, it would be about right. Yeah. Maybe here at Village, we're going to have to actually open one of those vegetarian restaurants. I think we have the skills. So anyway, all right, the topic this evening is marvelous motion. And many of you know this as exercise, but of course, exercise is not, I don't know, it just seems like work for a lot of people. So we try to think of other terms for it, but it's basically just moving your body, getting the blood flowing, and it affects our bodies in so many different ways. And as you probably know, exercise is good for you. Has there anybody, have you heard that before? That exercise is good for you? Some of you have heard that before. I don't know about the rest of you. I don't know if they hear me. Like, no, I'm kidding. So I have a few studies because, of course, this is a scientific talk, right? We'll get to the practical application in a minute. But this one is from the American Journal of Public Health in 1964. So that was a few years ago. And you'll notice these lines right here. And there's that one line that goes up represents the risk of dying, or the number of people who died per 100 man years. And those were the ones who had no exercise. There are several other lines here. Slight exercise. How did a slight exercise affect the risk of dying compared to no exercise? Pretty much cut it in half. That's amazing. And then moderate exercise compared to slight exercise, that cut the risk of dying in half again. And then heavy exercise cut it still another 25% or something like that. It's a little hard to tell from that graph, but you could see the more vigorous exercise, the lower the risk of dying. So that's a study from 1965, and I know some of the young people today think that was a long time ago, and maybe they didn't know how to do science back then. So guess what? I found when I was brushing up on this topic today, I actually had put together this presentation several years ago, but I just went to look to see what was new, and so I found this was actually just published this month. So this is brand new research. And my wife said, oh, that's too complicated. Well, it is a very complicated graph. So let me just simplify it for you. What it shows is the amount of exercise, as in how many minutes, and the intensity percentile. And so you'll notice, and here we have longevity instead of death. So the more minutes of exercise people did, the longer they lived, and the more intense. So if the people who did this 10th percentile, so not a lot of exercise, within that, the ones who had more intensity for their few minutes of exercise actually lived quite a bit longer than the ones who did low intensity exercise for those same few minutes. Does that make sense? So just a little bit of exercise, but more intensity, and you live longer, and that trend continues all the way up to long duration, high intensity exercise. Question? Yes, so the question is, can we define intensity? Yes, we'll get to that in a few minutes. So So this slide here, there's the reference, by the way, if you want the reference. This slide is for women, and this one is for men. Same setup on the slide, but you'll notice for men, it's actually an even greater difference. So something about men exercising has a more significant impact on their longevity. And I think probably everybody knows that men tend to die younger than women, at least in the modern era, okay? So that's pretty amazing. It tells us basically the same thing that we already knew in 1965, just in much more detail. And this was a much larger study. I forget the number of participants, but it was some crazy, huge number of people, and they tracked them for years. And so the actual study authors realized that this was a very complicated slide. So they made a different slide for those who didn't want to wade through all of this. Here we go. Life expectancy and volume and intensity of exercise. So the more volume and the more intensity of exercise you do, the higher and the longer your life expectancy. Is that simple enough? More exercise, live longer. Yay. That's pretty much. Now, there's always somebody's going to ask the question, well, could I do too much exercise? Well, that's an interesting theoretical question. And I say theoretical because the vast majority of people are not ever in danger of doing too much exercise. And I mean, so it's a theoretical possibility. So the studies that look at that, they look at the amount of exercise, and they find people who do extreme amounts of exercise, so exercising more than several hours a day, actually do have some increase in risk. The problem is, there's a thing called mathematics and statistics. Okay, so if you just have one or two, do you really know if that's just a coincidence or is it a real phenomenon? Well, the problem is there are so few people who exercise that much that it's hard to get a big enough group of them to really know for sure that they're having these health problems because of their exercise and not something else going on in their life. Does that kind of make sense? So that's one big problem with trying to answer that question. And another challenge with that question is that the people who exercise that much, for the most part, are extreme athletes. So think Olympians who are training and they're constantly on the verge of overtraining. Their goal is not health. Their goal is to win a medal. And they don't usually follow a balanced exercise program of strength and cardiovascular fitness and agility and all of the pieces together. So that also could skew the data. So it may be not the amount of exercise, it's, if you're running a marathon every day, that might not be healthy. And it might have less to do with the amount of time that you're exercising and the fact that you're doing so much of one kind of exercise. That'd be like if you just ate only the potatoes. You could survive on potatoes, but it wouldn't be the best diet. And it's the same way with exercise. If you do just one exercise and you specialize in that one thing and neglect balance, it's not going to give you the greatest health. Okay, one more graph, and then we'll get into some practical applications. So this is a different study, also a recent study. And here we have the two graphs. One on the left is the intensity of exercise and the risk of dying, and then the one on the right, we have the volume or the amount of time spent doing exercise and the risk of dying. And so you'll see there, this red line drops down pretty quickly here, so that the more the intensity, the more quickly the risk of dying drops. Over here with the volume, there's the same drop, but it's less dramatic. And so the authors of this study concluded that intensity is probably more important, but you have to also have a certain volume of exercise for that intensity to do its job. So you can't just exercise intensely for 1 minute a week and say, hey, I did really intense exercise, so I went from here to here. You got to have enough exercise for it to actually affect your body. And so they're showing that here. Intensity outweighs volume, but they're both important. And I would suggest that we want to keep this in mind as we're thinking about our health and our lifestyle and all the other things that we have to do and how we balance all of those things, just to realize, you know, sometimes you might not have an hour to exercise, but you can get significant benefits even in just a 10 or 15 minute bout of exercise. And so don't think that, well, if I can't go for an hour, I might as well just skip it. And no, you can, even if you only have 10 minutes, you'll do 10 minutes, and if you increase the intensity, you can benefit yourself a lot just in that 10 minutes. Any questions about this so far? Okay. So here are the actual recommendations, and this is a summary of recommendations from many studies that have been done mostly in the last 20 years and compiled by the Institute of Medicine. And the recommendation, here we go, 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity, and we'll define that in a minute, or 150 minutes a week of vigorous exercise, or some combination that adds up to that. So some days you might do more moderate, like walking. Some days you might do more vigorous, like jumping rope, or running, or kayaking up the river, or something like that. So here's talking about, notice it mentions volume and intensity in both of these statements. And then an additional recommendation to do some form of strength training at least 3 days a week. And finally, include activities that train balance and agility. And this is important for young people. It's important because it's kind of fun. And for older people, it's important because balance and agility help to prevent injury. And you notice sometimes around here, the ground outside provides little balance and agility challenges for us. Have you noticed that in the last few weeks? I noticed that. In fact, just last night, I was walking out after a meeting we had here last night, and there was a sheet of ice, and I was walking on that ice, and my feet slipped. And because I have done some activities that train balance and agility, I was able to maintain my balance and just kind of skate a little bit, even though I don't have skates on. And I didn't fall, and I didn't break anything. So, yay for that. Right? That's good. Any questions on this here? 300 minutes, 150 minutes? Yes.
Your recommended volume for the balance, strength, and agility exercise, or should it just be included in the general 300 or 150?
Right. So you could include that in here. That would be okay. And there's so different expert groups kind of state it different ways. Some of them say do this and then add this to it, and then others state it like this could be included in that. And so we'll talk about ways to include strength training in a more vigorous way that trains cardiovascular fitness as well as strength training. So there we're talking about if you're really busy and you don't have a lot of time and you need to do your strength training and your vigorous cardio at the same time, there's ways to do that, and it's kind of crazy, but it actually works really well. Okay, so now we're going to go through the different types of exercise. So there's traditional cardio or aerobic exercise. So this is things like jogging or hiking or swimming, riding a bicycle, all sorts of machines. You go to a gym, they have all sorts of like Stairmasters and ellipticals, and all of those are generally monostructural, and by that we mean they mostly use just one set of big muscles. So your legs, or the rowing machine will use your back and your hips, or something like that. Swimming is mostly the arms, depending on which method you're using. But those are the traditional aerobic cardiovascular exercises, and typically people will do those for a sustained period of time. 20 minutes would be kind of on the low end, and up to half an hour, and of course people that run marathons, it's several hours, things like that. Next is strength training, and this is anything that is using your muscles not so much for a long period of time to do repetitive motions, but for a shorter period of time with higher intensity of moving something that's relatively heavy. And there are other variations on that as well, but typically the most common variations are lifting weights or doing body weight exercises. So that would be things like pull-ups and push-ups and those sort of things where the weight is your body and you're moving your body through space. And there's, believe it or not, there are debates amongst fitness buffs as to which is better. Can you believe that? People debating things? So I happen to think that both are important in real life, because sometimes in real life you need to pick something up and move it, and other times in real life you need to move your body someplace. So I think we should do some of both, and also that keeps it more interesting, because if you just do the same, if you're just going to lift weights and you do the same lift, time after time, I get bored pretty quick. So I need to change it up a little bit. Yeah, I can do bench press, but what about push-up variations? What about other pushing movements? There's all sorts of things, and so that keeps it interesting for me. Some people like a routine, and they like to do the same thing every time. Like, well, okay, that's okay. But make sure that if you're doing the same thing every time, that you have a good routine that's actually covering the bases and getting you some sort of functional fitness while you're doing your vigorous activity to help you live longer. The next one I have down here is metabolic conditioning or high-intensity training. And this has become popular quite a bit in the last, I want to say 15 years or so, is partially popularized by CrossFit. Some of you may have heard of that. If you haven't, that's fine. But there's a number of different protocols or ways to do high-intensity training, and we'll get into some of those in a minute. So now the question is, well, how do we define high intensity versus vigorous or moderate or low intensity? So low intensity, for example, what you all are doing right now, you're just sitting there. So that by definition is low intensity. You're not exercising. I am just a little bit higher on the intensity scale at the moment because I'm standing and I'm moving around a little bit. But this doesn't really qualify as exercise. It's just slightly more than sitting, but really still in that not really exercise yet space. So when we're talking about moderate or vigorous exercise, one way to measure that is by heart rate. Another way is by your perception of how hard you're working. So let me talk about that, and then we'll come back to the numbers here. So right now, you're at the bottom of the scale. So if the scale is 1 to 10, and you're just sitting, and you're still savoring the yumminess of that food that we ate, and you're relaxing, the opposite end of that scale would be, I don't know, if a pack of wolves came running in the door to, tear you apart, what would you do? Well, you would have a fight or flight response, and you would look to run, climb something, fight, whatever. That maximal intensity, if you were, imagine you were walking down the street and those dogs are coming after you, and there's a tree 50 feet over there. And if you can run fast enough to get there before the dogs eat you, then you can climb the tree. You're going to put everything into that effort. That's 100%. You can't really do that for more than 50 or 100 feet because you just max out. You redline, you just can't go any faster. You also can't sustain that for more than a few seconds. Trained athletes, maybe a minute or so. Look at the times for a 100-yard dash or a 440 for competitive athletes, and those are all like short amount of time. So that's that 100%. So moderate is somewhere in the middle, and then vigorous is a little bit more than that, but not up to that 100%. Okay? So if we want to put numbers on it, here's a chart, and you have this in your handout. Hopefully it's large enough you can read it. Go down, you can find the age that's closest to your age. On the right-hand side is the theoretical maximum heart rate for an average person your age. And this is just a ballpark number. It's not an actual number for you. It's a statistical average. And then in the middle, we have a target heart rate, and there it says 65 to 80%. Do you see that? Where it says 65 to 80%? So the lower part of that number, so I'm just going to take the top one here for a 20-year-old, 130 to 160 beats a minute. So that 160 beats per minute is at 80% of the theoretical maximum. So we're going to define that as being vigorous exercise, the 80% of the maximum. The moderate exercise is on the other side of that, 130 or 65%, usually 65 to 75% would be considered moderate, and then above 75, 80% is going to be vigorous, and then up above 80 to 85% is going to be strenuous exercise. Okay, does that answer your question? Yes, okay, I just want to make sure I got the question answered. Now, I will tell you that there's not always a good correlation between perceived effort and the actual numbers. And I know this because I have, for example, I have patients over the years, and I see at least one healthcare professional here. I'm sure you have the same thing. The patient feels like they're giving their all, and you know they're not. Yeah. So, like, for example, I had a lady one time who, we were talking about exercise, and she was telling me that she was exercising every day, and she was walking a mile a day, and she couldn't understand why, she was not losing weight, and her blood sugars weren't good, and all this sort of thing. And so, remember, intensity matters. So I was asking her, well, how long does it take you to walk that mile? And she said, about 4 minutes or so. Oh, I see the problem. Because she was not a world-class athlete. Walking a mile in 4 minutes that's not possible. You're going to be running all out, and then you have to be a world-class runner to break the 4-minute mark, okay? So she was not that. What she was doing was she was walking from her house down to the end of the block and back, which was not even a quarter of a mile. But she thought that she was putting in effort and walking a mile. Okay? But I'll have to admit, I had the same problem myself of misjudging the intensity of my exercise. So I do a lot of different types of exercise because I like the variety, and I also feel like balance is good. Doing different things challenges the body in different ways. So, but I run sometimes, and I felt like I was doing okay with running. I'm not a runner. I don't necessarily like running per se, although I do like being outdoors and in nature, and so I'm happy to run outdoors. I hate running on a treadmill. I almost never do it just because I hate it, right? But I'd rather go run outside. Anyway, so I thought I was doing pretty good on vigorous exercise, and then my wife bought me this watch that tracks pulse, and it does all sorts of fancy stuff. It's one of these fitness watches, right? And I was quite disappointed to learn that my actual heart rate was not getting into the vigorous range when I thought I was doing vigorous exercise. It's like, oh, I had to push myself a little harder than what I thought I was doing in order to actually get the benefit that I wanted. So it was kind of a wake-up call for me. And so you don't need to check your pulse all the time, but it's probably a good idea to do it a few times to kind of get a sense, kind of calibrate your perceived effort with the actual numbers. And so you can use this as a rough estimate, and then check your pulse when you're exercising sometimes to see, are you in this zone that you think you're in? All right, some activities, and this can be more traditional cardio, or you could do this more of a high intensity type exercise. And I put a bunch of things on the list here. So splitting wood, moving irrigation lines. So I had, where I used to live, I had a lot of ranchers that were my patients, and they would tell me, oh, doc, you don't understand, I don't have time to work, I got to do this and do that. It's like, well, you can do that with more intensity. And so, for example, moving irrigation lines, I had one in my place, and most of my neighbors, they would get on their quads, they would drive out and unhook it, and then you have to go over and start the motor, roll the thing over, stop it, and go back, hook it up, and then go over to wherever the switch is to turn the pump on. And so my neighbors would be out on their quads doing all this, and I would just go and run. And I figured it was probably somewhere around 3/4 to a mile, depending on where in the field it was. But I was actually getting exercise, doing the chores, instead of just cruising around and saying, oh, I'm too busy to exercise. So you can weed the garden, you can pick up rocks, dig a ditch, buck hay bales. That's some work right there. If you never picked up hay bales, you might not know what exercise is yet. You should try that. Summertime, I used to work on the farm, the dairy over here at Andrews University, picking up hay bales in the summer. Man, that's some exercise. You could walk, hike, run, ride, treadmill, stationary bike, all different sorts of things. So you can turn your regular physical chores into moderately vigorous exercise if you want to. Some people are like, I don't want to go to the gym. I want to do something worthwhile. Like, okay, well, get off your riding mower and get a push mower and pick up the pace. You can get vigorous exercise mowing the lawn if you want to, but you have to be intentional about it. So those are some activities, and there's thousands more. Strength training, we're going to talk about that for a minute, and this is just some basic concepts for people who are beginning a strength training routine. So beginners, you're going to want to stay in the range of about 3 sets or maybe up to 5 sets, but around 10 repetitions. And so what do we mean by that? Well, a repetition is doing a movement. So if I have my flashlight, let's just pretend this is my weight, right? I'm lifting this, that's 1 repetition, 2, 3, and so on, okay? And then when I get to 10, that's 1 set. Then I'm gonna wait and let that muscle rest and recharge, let the ketones move out and more glucose move in and more oxygen, and that muscle kind of recharge itself. And I want to probably wait at least 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Could be a little longer if you have time. And then I'm going to come back and do another set of the same exercise. And I'm going to repeat that for, like I said, about 3 sets. And by the end of that 3rd set, you should be feeling like you couldn't really lift that thing one more time. And that's going to be about the right weight for you. So if in doubt, always start with a lighter weight and then just keep adding weight little by little until you find the one that maybe you could only do 9 on that last one. And then you say, okay, when I do this next week, I'm going to push hard and try to get 10 out of it. For intermediate lifters, it's going to be, perhaps you could go in the range of 5 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 5, and advanced athletes might do maximal 1 repetition maximum. So what's the heaviest thing that you can lift just 1 time? There are some reasons to do that, but there's also some risk involved. So when you get into those lower rep ranges and heavier weights, there's a little more risk of injury. And so you have to start assessing why you're doing that, and is there a risk of injury worth whatever reward you're getting? Because when we're talking about this sort of thing, it's not really necessary for the basic fitness and health. So you follow what I'm saying there? So that doesn't mean don't do it. It means that's kind of an advanced thing. Probably after a good year in this lower stages, developing the strength of the connective tissue, not just the muscles, but the bones, the ligaments, the cartilage, all of the connective tissues get stronger over time. So now, as far as a routine, here's a couple of options. Lifters will call this a 2-day split or a 3-day split. I'm giving you 2 options here. So this is a 2-day split. This is good for beginners, and you can probably do this maybe if you're going to do your strength training, say on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So this would be Monday, that would be Wednesday, Friday, come back to this, and then the next Monday, that one, and so on. Just keep alternating like that. And so here we have squats, rows, pull-ups, snatch, which is actually a little more of a technical power move. And then over here, deadlifts, bench press, shoulder press, and clean. So that's a kind of a full body, and those are compound lifts where eventually you're going to move heavy weights. And these are the kind of exercises that somebody was asking me earlier today about what's the best way to prevent osteoporosis and fractures, because slip and fall and you break something, you're more likely to break something if your bones are not dense and solid. So the best way actually to prevent osteoporosis, well, it's complicated. Don't smoke. That's number 1. But on the positive side, the best thing you can do is actually lift heavy things with these sort of lifts, like the deadlift and the squat. And that actually stimulates your bones to get stronger, not just your muscles. So here's a 3-day split with some suggested exercise. So the first day would be legs and abs, and the second day back and biceps, and then the third day chest, triceps, and shoulders. Some people would put this as a leg day, a pull day, and a push day. Just turns out that way. Pushing, all of these kind of movements are pushing movements, and these are all pulling movements. So that's another way to do it. If you're doing the previous one, what you're going to see is that you're going to end up doing the same workout twice in a week. And in the beginning, that's fine, but as you get stronger and you start lifting heavier weights, it's better to have a little longer time in between doing the same exercise so that those muscles can recover and actually get stronger. And so then it's probably better to switch to a 3-day split. So you would only do legs once a week in that routine. Or you might, if you're going to do strength training 4 times a week, say, you might do this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and come back to this on Thursday. But then it's going to be longer because it'll be the end of the next week before you get to that again. So some of you are looking like this is getting complicated. You following so far? This is just options, okay? By the way, well, we'll get to that in a minute. So here's a sample workout. 3 sets of squats, 3 sets of crunches, 3 sets of lunges, and then 3 sets of hollow body holds. So here we have both weight lifting exercises, if you're using weights for your squats. For some people, body weight squats is enough to challenge them. And here we have just a body position. So there's not necessarily any weight involved, but just holding that position for 30 seconds could be challenging. And of course, if it's not, you can increase the time, or you can add weight. Put ankle weights and hand weights on there, and 30 seconds can be really challenging. So that's just one example. Before I go on, any questions about strength training? Yes?
Would abs fall into, or abdominal work fall into?
Yeah, so that's going to typically be strength training. And when you say where would it fall into, what do you mean? That was, yeah, so it's going to be, a lot of people think of that as core exercises. So back, abdominals, that's part of the core. But if you're training that in a regimen of strength training, it's going to fit in there somewhere. And I typically will do that on the leg day. So it'll be legs and abs, like this example here. So you see squats and crunches, and then lunges, another leg exercise, and then hollow body hold is another abdominal exercise. For those who don't know what that is laying on your back and holding your legs and your arms and your head up, so you're contracting the abdomen to hold everything up off of the ground and holding that position for whatever the length of time is. It's quite challenging if you haven't done it before.
So I'm thinking, like, say if I'm doing a plank, that would be a hollow body sort of hold thing?
Sort of, yeah. Plank is facing down, and then it's actually, yeah, it is working the core, and it's working the abs somewhat, although not as strongly as the hollow body hold.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to go on to high intensity exercise. Now, I will say high intensity exercise is challenging because it's high intensity. It just means it's harder. So it's harder physically, and it's also harder mentally. And put that down here as one of the benefits of high intensity exercise is disciplining yourself, because when you set a goal for yourself, I'm going to do such and such exercise, and then you start going and it's really hard, it's tempting to say, well, I didn't sleep well last night and I haven't drank enough water today, so I should probably back off just a little bit so I don't overdo it. And you're just making excuses for yourself at that point, because you should think about that ahead of time anyway. So mental training is a side benefit of high intensity training, but generally the advantages are, compared to traditional aerobic exercise, there's a greater and more significant metabolic change. So this has to do with insulin sensitivity, reducing blood sugar levels, improving cholesterol profile, that sort of thing. It's a more efficient use of time, so you can get the same or greater benefits in less time by doing high intensity versus low intensity exercise. And surprisingly, you can get greater gains for endurance as well, even though high intensity exercise isn't really endurance exercise per se. Because it hits all the metabolic pathways, it actually increases endurance as well as anaerobic capacity. Greater retention of muscle mass during weight loss. So for people that are trying to lose weight, high intensity exercise is preferred precisely because it preserves muscle mass, which helps to accelerate the process of weight loss, as opposed to, for example, just walking or jogging. So as people are doing some sort of moderate intensity cardio over a long period of time, they tend to lose muscle mass, because really, if you're just jogging, you don't need all the upper body muscles that much, really, for just jogging. And so your body says, oh, our thing is going to be going on these long walk, jog things. Like, we don't need all this other muscle either. We'll lose muscle along with the fat. But if you're using those muscles for doing some high intensity workouts, and we'll get into that in a minute, then it actually stimulates growth factor hormones and things like that that help to maintain the lean muscle mass even while the person is losing fat, which is what we want. I mentioned this, the possibility of working all the metabolic pathways at once, which we're not going to go into that, but there's some really neat physiology as you understand the energy pathways in the body. And then I already mentioned improvement in insulin sensitivity. So there's several basic ways of doing high intensity training. A lot of people will also throw in the word interval, high intensity interval training, and that is one way of doing high intensity training, is using intervals. And so we'll talk about that. So for interval training, you're going to choose your activity, and it may be, usually it's just one form of exercise, although it could be more than one, but typically it's going to be one. So you might just say, okay, my activity is going to be just walking or running, okay? And then you're going to choose your intervals, and your intervals, you're going to have a high intensity interval and a rest interval. But the rest interval, usually you're going to be active during that. So you might say my high intensity interval is going to be 1 minute, and then my rest interval is going to be 1 minute. And so you would set a timer for 1 minute that would sound an alarm every minute. And then you would go as fast as you can for 1 minute. And when the timer sounds, then you're going to slow down and walk at a recovery pace, trying to catch your breath for 1 minute. When that sounds again, then you're going to go as fast as you can for that next minute, and so forth. And then you're going to choose your total exercise time. So that might be 10 minutes, 20 minutes is typical, between 10 to 20 minutes. You could go as high as 30 minutes, although if you're going for that long, the intensity tends to trail off toward the end, because that's a lot of work if you're doing high intensity, and you can't maintain that, because metabolically, it's hard to keep that up unless you're a trained athlete. So then you want to track your progress. And I find this important, again, because it's easy to forget how you did last year or 2 years ago and just think, oh, I'm going along fine. And you start tracking and realize, oh, I'm not quite, my goal is to improve. I want to get stronger and faster. Or worst case scenario, I want to prevent loss of capacity as I age so that when I get to be 90, I can still go and run around in the woods and do stuff for fun. Right? Yeah, that's my goal. So we're going to track our progress. So this is a way of doing it. The intervals typically are going to be short intervals of high intensity and equal or longer intervals of low intensity recovery work. Sometimes there'll be total rest. So there's one where it's 10 seconds of work, 20 seconds of rest, and you do that for 8 minutes. And it was designed in Japan, called Tabata intervals, and it was just doing body weight squats. And if you do that in 8 minutes, you've had as good of a workout as if you went and jogged for an hour. It's crazy. It's crazy. You also don't feel like doing anything for the next hour because you spent so much energy on that. So you go super fast for 10 seconds, and then you do nothing for 20 and repeat and repeat and repeat. Usually it's going to be, though, a little bit more of intense exercise and a moderate or easy activity alternating. So another simple way to do this, for example, is if you are maybe going out where where I used to live, there was a power line that went along the road with power poles. Anybody ever seen that? It's a thing. Okay, so you could run from one power pole to the next, and then walk to the next one, and then run to the next one, and then walk to the next one, and then run to the next one. And just do that for 20 minutes. Right? You don't even have to measure anything. There's a power company put the poles there for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Pretty simple. And there's all sorts of options. But any questions on that interval training? Yes.
How do you get your exercise?
All right. So the question is, where do I exercise?
Yes.
Or how?
Yes, because it sounds as though you do.
I do, and I usually do it at home or out and about. There's a lovely wellness center over here. I've been there. My problem is when I go there to exercise, they're closed. Because I usually work out at 5 in the morning, and for some strange reason, they're not open at 5 in the morning. So I have weights in my shop at home, and I run around the neighborhood and try not to scare the neighbors too bad, stuff like that. But so that's what works for me.
Can
Yes.
I make a comment?
You may.
So I have discovered up in St. Joe at the Senior Center.
Okay.
It's, if you qualify age-wise, it's free. And they have a wonderful weight room up there.
Yeah.
And free weights, and they have some outdoor, like exercise stations.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, in the weight room, they have someone to show you how to use the machines.
Nice.
And to kind of help you figure out what you're doing, and treadmills and ellipticals, and
Right.
but they do close. It's around 3:30 in the afternoon, though. So it's
Okay.
and they close when the public school closes too. So
Oh, interesting. Okay.
it-
So that's another option for people here locally. And I know there's the wellness center at the university, and there's the Y down in Niles. But for me, I always found I just plan on exercising at home. And I got some of my exercise equipment I've had for almost 30 years. Some of it I've gotten free off of like Facebook Marketplace. when stuff comes up, like, oh, I want that, and I'll watch and watch and watch until they're giving it away, and then I grab it. So you can improvise a lot of things too with just a little creativity. And now, of course, the internet is an amazing wealth of ideas. Of course, you have to be a little careful with that because some of those ideas are pretty wacky, and you don't want to do anything to hurt yourself. But you know, if you use a little discretion and common sense, you can get ideas on how to improvise a lot of different exercise equipment at home, so you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on that. But it's a trade-off, and it's an investment in yourself. Whether you choose to pay a membership at a gym, if that's what works for you and you do that regularly, that's wonderful. Or you can invest in some equipment to have at home if you're going to use it. You know, a lot of people invest, but then they don't use the equipment, so it doesn't help anything that way. And that's true of both gym memberships and at-home exercise equipment. So, all right. Next example of high intensity is a workout where here we don't have any planned intervals. It's just as many rounds as possible in 20 minutes of 20 squats, 20 push-ups, 20 sit-ups. So you just do this over and over again as fast as you can for 20 minutes. And your score is how many times did you complete all three of these exercises in that 20 minutes. Well, what happens quite naturally is it ends up being interval training because you go as fast as you can, and then you're just like, I gotta catch my breath here for a second. And then you're thinking, oh, the clock is running down, and I need to push because I want to beat my score from last time. So you start going again, and you go and you go and go, and then you kind of hit the wall again. And so, you know, if you do it regularly, then you can start to pace yourself and realize, okay, I can do so many, and if I pace myself, so it doesn't have to turn into intervals, but often it does. What the idea is here, it's high intensity because now you're not really counting your heart rate. You're just saying, how much work can I do in 20 minutes? And that's a short enough time where you can do fairly intense work for most of that time if you're somewhat trained. And again, this is just one example. It could be any sort of combination of movements. So another one, for example, run 400 meters and do 20 push-ups and 20 pull-ups, and then run 400 meters again, and repeat and repeat. Just there's so many different combinations. The idea is just find some usually complementary, so that and it could be 2 or 3 or 4. You get more than that, and it's hard to keep track when you're low on oxygen and trying to work hard. But usually it's going to be complementary exercises, not 3 exercises that hit the same muscle group. So that way your legs are recovering while you're doing push-ups, and then your chest is recovering while you're doing the sit-ups, and by then you're back to hit the legs again. And it's how much metabolic output can I do? And so this kind of combines strength training with aerobic exercise into this high intensity training. Okay. Any questions about that sort of thing? I know this is just one example, and we could probably do a whole class on how to design these types of workouts, but we don't have time for that tonight. So if we have a question, yes.
What if you have some sort of injury? How can you get the most intense workout from your exercises?
You find a good physical therapist. Yeah. So, yes, injuries, sometimes people use injuries as an excuse to not exercise. And in reality, an injury is an opportunity to be creative with designing a workout so that you can exercise in spite of that injury and not hurt yourself. So, for example, I would just say, what if I broke my foot? And so I could probably do all of these exercises, although squats might be a problem depending on if I'm in a boot or what, right? So maybe I would replace that with flutter kicks and hip extensions, which I can do without putting weight on my foot, but it's still going to work the hips, and I can still do push-ups and sit-ups. Right? So you adjust and work around it while you're healing, and then of course at some point you're going to have to start to rehab the injured joint or body part and build that thing back stronger than it was before, hopefully.
I'm thinking, for example, like if you have something wrong, like a slipped disc, maybe you shouldn't be exercising if you have a slipped disc. But
Yeah.
like maybe a long-term or chronic injury, and you want to work out your shoulder, but it's painful or something. Like, how would you get the best exercise for a chronic, a long-term injury?
Yeah. So I'll go back to my first answer. Talk to a good physical therapist. Yeah. Usually, if it's any one body part, there are so many different ways to exercise. It's pretty easy to find things that you can work around that. But a lot of people have bad knees and a bad back and a shoulder, and then it's like, okay, that's getting kind of difficult. We're just going to throw you in the water and flounder around, and that's your exercise. Or something like that. But really, if somebody has significant problems like that are chronic, they should be seeking some professional help with that from a good physician, physical medicine and rehab specialist, probably getting a physical therapist to work with as well. Okay. All right. So next steps. Assess your situation. So think about your time and intensity of exercise over the last 6 weeks since the beginning of the year. I'm not asking you to proclaim it publicly, but think this to yourself. Are you somewhere close to those recommendations, or are you not? And if you're not, if you are, good for you. If you're not, then we want to think about, okay, where are you? And if you're really not doing any exercise, don't set the goal to this week do 300 minutes. Set the goal maybe 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day of something. Like go for a walk. Right? That one slide. You remember it, 10-minute walk. If you go from doing no exercise to doing a 10-minute a day walk, you increase your life expectancy by a year, pretty much. That's amazing. And not only that, but there's so many other benefits just from a 10-minute increase in exercise. So choose one thing, and I'm going to say if you're doing nothing, start with a walk, 10-minute walk. That's going to be the best place to start, probably. Everybody's different, and maybe it'll be different for you, but choose something to add or to change in what you're doing, and then develop the new habit. So if it is a 10-minute walk, set your goal. I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk at least 5 days in the next week, and go for that, and track yourself, and get an accountability partner, and create a habit of going for a walk every day. And it might take a week or two to do that, but once you have the habit of going for a walk, then you can come back and think, okay, now what am I ready for? Oh, maybe I'm going to add doing push-ups. I'm going to do, push-ups before I get in the shower. And maybe I can only do half a push-up. But if I'm just going to do that every day before I get in the shower, I'll do as many push-ups as I can do. I'll do half of one every day until I can do a whole one, and then we'll celebrate, and then I'll do 2, and then 3, and then, okay, by then you've got a new habit of doing push-ups every day. Okay, that's great. So then what's another little habit? Oh, maybe spend a couple of minutes stretching, or maybe spend a minute doing some balance exercise. Like, how many of you actually intentionally train your sense of balance? Anybody here? Am I really the only one? There's one over there, sort of, sometimes, when you have time and you remember. Yeah. So, I mean, how are you going to have fun on the slopes if you can't balance? I don't know. Okay. Sorry, I'm not meaning to make it personal. I'm just saying. So do something fun. Maybe it could be with balance. I don't know. Maybe not. But so look for things that are going to increase your overall functionality in life, increase your longevity. See, it's not just about living longer. Who wants to live, 5 or 10 years longer laying in a bed in a nursing home, waiting for the occupational therapy person to come around and make you do your exercises? Does anybody want that? No. I want to live 10 years longer, but I want to be doing fun stuff for those 10 years. And it turns out that being stronger and fitter provides both of those things. It helps you live longer, and it allows you to do more interesting things for those longer years of life. So, assess your situation, choose a small change, develop a new habit, and then repeat. And keep repeating that process little by little, building a better program for yourself to make your exercise enough to give you the benefit and also make it an enjoyable part of your life. And then, as I said before, track your progress, because it's just helpful to know how you're doing, because it's so easy to forget from one year to the next whatever you did before. And I actually have on my phone an app where I track stuff. I've been using that app for over 10 years now. So when I go and do an exercise I haven't done for a while, I can look back and say, oh yeah, back in 2020 I did this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I can still beat that. I'm going to go again and see if I beat what I did back then. So I use Fit Notes. It's free on Android. There is a iPhone version of it that I haven't used, but I've had other people say that it works pretty good. It's free, but I paid the $5 for the paid version. I paid that probably after 6 months of using it. I wanted to add a few little custom things, and so I paid the $5, and so I've been using it for the last however many years with all the features, and I think it's well worth it. So there's a number of other apps out there too. That's just the one I like because it has great functionality as a free app, but then the paid version has everything else that I wanted, all the custom stuff, because I do weird, like I make up my own weird workouts that nobody's ever heard of before, and I can add those in there and track them for myself. So, all right, any other questions? That is, the last thing, you should have received a page that looks like this. Did you get one of those? So this is for you. Feel free to make copies of this if you want. It's on both sides, so you can fill in one side, you can make copies of the other, or whatever you want. This is just a weekly calendar, and I put 2 time slots in there. So morning and afternoon, and it could be evening instead of afternoon. So this is just a suggestion, and this is kind of what I aspire to. I'll put it that way. 2 to 3 days of just plain strength training. And for me, it alternates between weightlifting and body weight gymnastic type exercises. 2 to 3 days per week of some sort of high intensity something. And then 1 day a week of some long distance something, whether it be running or rowing or canoeing or something, hiking, some kind of longer thing where this might take an hour or two, to go do that. And then 1 or 2 days of active rest. Now, if you're good at math, you're going to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days a week. Like, what's going on? Well, you could work out more than once a day. Right? You could actually do a strength training workout in the morning and a high intensity thing in the evening, especially if it's only 15 minutes. You could do a 15-minute in the morning and a 15-minute in the afternoon. And so the idea is these are kind of the blocks of things, and typically my goal for active rest is I rest on Sabbath. I don't work out on Sabbath, but I do like to go out in nature and walk around and look at things. So that's active rest. Almost never take a day of just laying and doing nothing unless I'm sick or recovering from an injury sometimes, but that's unusual. And then ideally, all of this actual workout would be over a base of just walking, like walk a couple miles a day. And I don't even really consider that exercise. It's just moving, and walking is good movement for our bodies. Our bodies are designed to walk, not to drive cars. And our modern society kind of pushes us toward we have to drive everywhere. And I'm not necessarily totally against that, but then we have to compensate by intentionally walking sometimes. Oh, yes. Yes, thank you for that. Right. Okay, and that's it. Do you have any other questions? Is anybody inspired a little bit? Overwhelmed a little bit? No, it's inspired? Okay. Now, I will suggest to you, if you haven't heard already, we have here at Village the Village Vitality Challenge. We have a Facebook group, and I believe we have a link from our web page, so villagesda.org. You can go there and find the Village Vitality Challenge. And if you want to join in the Facebook group, we post things in there, challenges, encouragement, things like that. And our theme for this month is, guess what? Activity is exercise. And so we are beginning the process of correlating our Dinner with the Doctor talks with our Village Vitality Challenge. So every month we're going to have a challenge, and then halfway through the month we're going to have a talk to kind of give a little boost to the people that are doing the challenge. So I'm glad you're able to join us tonight, even though it's kind of cold out there. And I hope that you'll take up this challenge of physical activity. And finally, I want to close with just saying a lot of people will ask questions about, well, your church, like, why are you talking about physical exercise? And I'm just going to say it's because my body is a temple of God. And I want to take care of it in order to honor God. Just as we would be embarrassed if our church was run down and the sliding was falling off and the paint was chipped and the carpets were a tripping hazard, we would want to do something about that. So with our physical bodies, if we're able to engage in activity and keep our bodies in good condition so that it reflects honor to the Creator, why wouldn't we want to do that? So for me, there is a spiritual connection, and it's not that physical exercise is the most important thing, but it's a part of living a life that honors God. And so with that, let's bow our heads for our closing prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And we pray that tonight, as we've seen some of the research and we've talked about ways that we can improve the function and fitness of our bodies, I pray, Lord, that you would help us. Sometimes we're challenged by circumstances in our lives and our other habits. So, Lord, help us to do the things that honor you And as we think of the psalm that makes reference to the rejoicing as a strong man rejoices to run a race. So Lord, help us to rejoice in the bodies that you've given us. And we do look forward to the day when they will be new as well. And we thank you for hearing and answering our prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen.